Today is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. The time is 9:04 a.m. This is a special meeting agenda to continue our interviews for Panhandle Health District Board. And attending our commission is Duncan Brooks and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. First business item is Dr. Bruce Edwards. Excuse me, do you prefer to be addressed as Doctor or Bruce?
Either one's
Okay, fair enough. And so he is our first interviewee, our first candidate this morning. And so without any further delay, tell us a little bit. We've got your resume, we've reviewed it, but if there's anything additional or whatever you'd like to share before we ask questions?
No, I just retired last year, right before COVID. And my wife and I are now both retired, and we've been kind of thinking about what we can do for the community. And so my wife is really thinking about animals. And so I thought that this was something where I could contribute because I have a lot of experience, a lot of time as a physician and administrator. And so I saw your ad in the paper, and that's actually what.
All right. Because this is on YouTube, you may want to just try to speak into the microphone so people out there
try
can.
to get to within a few inches if you could. Thank you.
Sorry, is that better?
Perfect,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay then. Leslie, go ahead.
Sure. What is the role of Panhandle Health District's board?
Well, I see them as as essentially a group that meets to consider public health issues throughout the community, and to meet both the public health needs as well as the community needs in order to balance those two. And I think that there's a balance that exists between the needs of the community and the needs of public health, and also to recognize and identify any risks to public health. And then really, I think a big part is education. I think that one of the best things that we can do for the community is to let them make their own decisions, but let them make their decisions based on good information.
Okay. Do you know where their funding comes from, Panhandle's funding?
No, I don't.
Okay. Bill?
That's it? You've probably been, obviously you read the paper. You're very aware, I'm sure, of all the mask mandates and unmandates and remandates. And how do you feel about mandates in general? And specifically, this last go-around we had with a mask mandate.
Well, I think that one of the reasons that my wife and I retired in Idaho is we're fairly independent people. And I think that up here there's a large group of people that I even encountered with regular flu vaccinations that like to make their own decisions. And I think that there's a balance between people making their own decisions and making informed, educated decisions, and then making mandates. And I think that those need to be very, very carefully weighed before you take away free will. And I think that's one of the things that I see that the board doing is weighing all those options very carefully before they ever make the move to something as strong as a mandate. I think there are certainly times in history when a mandate was required. Back in the day, they had quarantine and things like that, and they had other public health measures. But I think that today people are inundated with information, some of it good, some of it not so good, and I would hope that the Public Health Board would be the sounding board and sort of the authoritative data source to help people make those decisions.
Well, following on that, do you think they have the authority to mandate or strongly recommend?
I think if they have the support of the people, yes.
That they can mandate?
If it's, I think the mask mandate is a very difficult issue. I think that people bear the consequences of their decisions. Mm-hmm. I think that we were swept up in both national and state and then local decisions. And I think that I think at the time when we had no idea really the extent of COVID, I think it was probably a prudent first step. But then I think as more data comes in and we have more clarity on the situation, I think that we're always learning. And I think that, that probably at the beginning of this pandemic, about half the stuff that we assumed has now been proven wrong. We just didn't know which half. And so I think that, that knowledge and education evolves. And so I think that the board needs to be responsive to new information, but also to public opinion. So I think that yes, in certain cases, a mandate would be appropriate, but I think that it needs to be something that is done really as a last resort. And it also needs to be considered at every time there's a new piece of data or there's new information that may inform that decision. I think that that needs to be considered.
Thank you.
Kind of a follow-up on that. Do you think it's okay to quarantine healthy people?
Well, quarantine's a very defined subject. Back in the day, in order to save one part of a community, they would quarantine, not by individuals, but by geographic location. They would just basically cut off part of the town, and they would let the epidemic burn itself out. And those that were in there either survived or didn't. And that was really to stop it. They would quarantine people on ships and say, you stay on the ship for 40 days, and anybody who's got the whatever is the plague is going to either survive or die from it. And then by the time 40 days has passed, when you guys come ashore, it's over. So quarantining healthy people, putting healthy people in quarantine occurs when it's done geographically, but historically we don't do that anymore. Now we isolate, which is a different term for healthy individuals. And I think that self-isolation can be helpful for the individual. Absolutely. If we tell you that the best thing for you to do is, stay home for a couple weeks or stay away from your elderly grandparents or your cancer survivor spouse, I think that isolation is a good thing. I think it's one card in the entire deck of cards that need to be played. But I think that, again, it can be done on an individual basis, not in a large group. So quarantine, I think, it's a blunt instrument that we really don't use today.
Okay. Did you want to go on?
Sure. What do you think about the one septic system per 5 acre minimum rule over the aquifer?
I think that the aquifer is a protected resource. And I think that it's incredibly vulnerable. And I think that we need to at least consider the impact of any large, heavy concentration of septic systems within the aquifer. I think that if we look back in time, we will see that we didn't always follow that rule. And I think that those are things that happened in the past that we don't necessarily have to, tear down a bunch of houses and move them out to meet that rule. But I think in the future going forward, as we learn more about the vulnerabilities of the aquifer, we need to consider what would be the right level of concentration of septic systems over the aquifer, knowing that it impacts so many people. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that nutrition and/or prevention should fill a bigger role in Panhandle Health's community education?
Well, I think that education is vitally important, and I think that nutrition, education about nutrition and proper nutrition is important. And I think that the way that we really improve health is at the grassroots level. This is where we teach families to take care of their children, and we start with good eating habits and things like that. I think that we have a lot of conditions in society today that are probably preventable. And it's probably no secret that both of my residencies are covered under the American Board of Preventive Medicine. So I'm a huge proponent of preventive maintenance or preventive medicine to avoid problems further on. So in that regard, I think nutrition is important to avoid conditions later that are probably preventable.
Okay. Bill, thank you.
With public health, Panhandle Health specifically, do you know, in addition to mask mandates, other things they might do, their duties as Panhandle Health District?
Well, I think that they monitor the health of the community, specifically with regard to infectious disease and infectious disease reporting. And I think it's important to constantly surveil the community to make sure that we don't have an outbreak of a different condition, and we're always looking at it. I think that we sort of, I believe that a health department, and that's why I can't really say because I haven't looked at Panhandle Health, but I think that we need to look at some of the morbidity and mortality in the community and look at some of the riskiest things that people do and what kills people. Having said that, I think that there's a line between society and health. In other words, I don't think that every problem that we have in society is a public health crisis, although I see that a lot in the media today.
Okay. Leslie?
Can you imagine a circumstance when mandating a vaccine could be necessary?
Yes, I think in certain conditions, in other words, if I was working in a clinical operation where we had a lot of vulnerable individuals, say a cancer ward, I think that saying that in order to protect these vulnerable individuals, if you want to work in this particular environment, then you need to have a vaccine. Now that's a condition of employment, and you're probably looking at a larger scope, which would be a mandate from the public health department.
Yes.
I think that the answer is probably no. I think that people have the ability to make their own decision, and I think that that we should provide them with education and then let them make their own decision. But I think that that Northern Idaho is a fairly independent group of people, and certainly before the COVID, even in the flu vaccine arena, there are lots of opinions, and I think that people, you make a decision and then you also bear the consequences or the benefits of that decision.
That's interesting. So if somebody makes a decision not to be vaccinated, what about the community effect? Let's say that individual decides, and we obviously have a number of them, but so I'm going to take it one step further, and that individual now potentially puts other individuals at risk. Where do you draw the line?
Well, I think that the risk belongs, the people that are not vaccinated, and let's say they're conducting risky activities, I think that that everybody needs to know that that's a risky activity, and so those people bear the responsibility for doing it. But I think also the people that are at risk need to know that if they engage in those activities, they'll be placing themselves at risk. So I think that there's some responsibility on both sides of the spectrum for those that are vulnerable as well as those that feel like they're invulnerable.
Okay.
That's kind of that's a tough question. I think there's other consequences too. I think that if someone decides not to get vaccinated and they engage in risky activities and suddenly they have COVID, that's a burden on the community. And certainly with the way that healthcare is funded and the way that we operate, everybody's entitled to healthcare regardless of ability to pay, but none of that healthcare is free.
Okay, thank you. I guess we do have one final question here. How would you keep us apprised of events going on at Panhandle Health or meetings, whatever? What's your preferred method of communication?
You mean actual method of communication?
Yeah, in other words, would you rather call? Would you rather send emails? Would you rather text? What's your preferred method for
So
keeping us
you'd be
apprised?
our representative
you're-
on the
yes.
board.
I think it would be primarily email.
Okay.
I think because it's a nice written record that exists, and it can go to multiple individuals.
I got one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You jumped by me here.
No, I went after her. I went after Leslie.
I know, you had a question and you've,
Oh, go right ahead.
this has to do with stem cells. And there's a lot of advertising today about stem cell therapy. And I wanted to know your position. I know there's a rather limited number where that the efficacy has been proven, but do you believe it's okay to just do stem cells for other problems?
Well, I think that stem cells have a large untapped potential that we don't understand yet, because they're undifferentiated. They can kind of do anything, and we're just beginning to understand the potential from stem cells. I think most of the controversy revolves around where do you obtain stem cells. I think that there are stem cells that we throw away every day, and things like umbilical cord blood. And I think that there's ethical ways that put the community at ease that you can do that. And I think that there's also anytime that there's money to be made or there's a profit, there are people that will do things unethically too. So I think it needs to be monitored. But going back to your question, I think that there are a lot of things out there that we're just beginning to understand. Every night on TV, you can see 10 commercials for monoclonal antibodies. This rituximab, infliximab, and that's something, a monoclonal antibody started off almost like a stem cell, where people had a lot of skepticism and concern about, changing their DNA and things like that. And they've turned out to be a wonderful product that have helped a lot of people with a lot of chronic conditions. So I think that stem cells are a potential way to help alleviate human suffering, but I think that they're not quite mature yet. I think that research needs to continue.
But you do see them being useful in some cases and open to, I don't want to say fraud, but
Exploitation.
exploitation, unproven.
I think everything is, open to exploitation. And in fact, when a lot of people ask me about things like supplements and other stuff, one of my answers is I tell them to follow the money. And if some of these supplements that are out there were really, truly valuable and did a great job, then they would have been picked up by the pharmaceutical companies and they would be under patent and we would be writing scripts for them. And so I think stem cells are kind of the same thing. If they show tremendous benefit, I think we'll see that they're going to move from sort of the research arena over into more of the mainstream arena, just like I was talking about with monoclonal antibodies. And then suddenly the pharmaceutical companies you'll see advertisements on TV if they really work. But I don't think that we're there yet. And I hope I answered your question.
You did very well, thank you.
Thank you. I think that, Leslie, did you have anything else?
No,
you wanted to add?
I'm good.
No? How about questions for us?
I don't have a lot of questions. I'm in a unique position now that I'm a retired physician in the community, and I'm woodworking and fishing and enjoying the Great Panhandle. So I don't really have much of an agenda. I have a very broad, diverse background in lots of different groups, and including overseas, which is a different way of life. And so really what I hope to do is bring some of that perspective to this group and see if we can, offer one more set of eyes and one more perspective to some of these challenges and offer solutions. So no, I don't have a lot of questions. I don't have any huge expectations. I'm not looking to change the world, if that That makes sense.
I do have a question. How many years did you spend in the Air Force? Was it over 20?
Yes, 24 or 28. My 4 years of medical school were in Washington DC on active
Courtesy of the
duty.
Air Force, okay.
It's kind of like the academy.
Just a question of no consequence. Were your parents in the military?
Yes.
With the Air Force?
Yes.
Well, good, then they weren't disappointed.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I was born in Germany. My parents were stationed abroad.
And what was your rank at discharge?
Colonel.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, my final job, I was a hospital commander.
Okay. Anything else?
No?
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Now, if we're going to have public comment, it'll be comment, not Q&A. Oh,
Since 2015.
okay.
I was
Good
actually,
question, by the way.
I actually lived in Idaho back in 2004 to 2006 when I was stationed home at Mountain Home Air Force Base.
How long were you at Mountain Home?
2 years.
Oh, 2 years, okay. All right. If there's nothing further, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. We should be making a decision at the latest next week, and everyone will be notified.
Thank you.
You bet. Likewise. Okay. So Dr. Richard Meyer is next. Is he here? We'll take a look. Is he? Yeah, Dr. Richard Meyer. Mhm. Anyway, welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Good to see you. What we're trying to do, for the sake of consistency and uniformity, is basically ask everybody the same questions. So if we don't address your submission, we will certainly look at it when it's over.
Okay.
And we won't be making a decision anyway till next week. Now, some of the questions might actually give you the opportunity to tap into, whatever it is you've submitted to us. And so why don't we just start by, obviously, it's a single position that is available. The meetings that are conducted at Panhandle Health typically run about an hour, and there are 9 to 10 per year. Occasionally, there are additional meetings if there's a particular circumstance that arises. And I presume that would not be an issue for you.
No.
Okay. So before we get started, and we've reviewed your resume, is there anything you'd like to share with us?
Of course, this
Well, yeah,
presentation.
aside from the submission.
Actually, if I do go back to this thing, I do believe that, and I've read over all of the priorities
Okay.
of the Panhandle Health District. However, I do think obesity is the biggest single problem facing us and, of course, worldwide.
Okay.
And I have some answers on how to address that. And that's kind of why I gave you those steak strips, because that was the first product I had to develop when I was at Alberta. Costco came through our plant and says, hey, jerky is awfully tough. Can you make a tender version? I made a tender version. And then I went on to make even better products at Texas Tech, including chicken. I can do that. That bag costs about $10. I can do it for $2.
Okay. So that's your, obesity is, I can understand that.
Well, the other thing is that in this covert crisis, if you go back and look at the folks that actually passed away from this, they had a compromised immune system, but I think you'll find that obesity was the #1 contributing factor to folks dying of COVID-19.
Interesting.
So I do think obesity is the big health issue. I know that we're kind of the middle of the pack. I've studied all of that in terms of all the states in the United States. Colorado's even lower. We're supposed to be around 30%. My guess is much higher than that. And I think we can address that, and there's a way to do it.
Okay. So why don't we get on with, asking you some questions, if that's okay?
Sure.
Leslie, take.
What is the role of Panhandle Health District's board?
I think it's to promote health and well-being. I know that I've seen the mission statement, but I think it's really identifying those factors that will contribute to good health and healthy lifestyles in the community.
Okay. Do you know where Panhandle Health's funding comes from?
No, I don't. Well, I know there's a variety of locations that it comes from. I know that the county commissioners provide funding. My guess there's some grants coming in to Panhandle. The state, I think, gives some funding to it. And I know that each county contributes to it because it's actually, what, about 5 counties that have joined together on this one?
That is correct. Yep, District 1. Bill?
It's been in the news, mandates, mask mandates, and the other mandates. Do you believe that Panhandle Health should be issuing mandates on anything?
Only when, I think if CDC comes in with some strong recommendations, then fine. I do think that maybe they can help assist CDC if there's really a crisis, but otherwise, you know, I think you have to have individual responsibility in a lot of this. So I think that's the absolutely last resort, is to issue mandates.
Do you think we got to that point in Kootenai County that mandates were warranted? Were we at the last resort stage, if you will?
I think so, but if you know, here's what, I'm being a scientist, and I've studied viruses. Viruses will pass right through this. You need a better mask than this. This will give you some protection. I mean, maybe 30%. So there's something there. I don't like mandates, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Leslie?
What do you think about the 1 septic system per 5-acre minimum rule over the aquifer?
Would you repeat that again?
Sure. So right now, there's a Panhandle Health District rule that says only 1 septic system is permitted per 5 acres when property is located over the aquifer.
I don't know how good the science is on septic systems. I understand it's getting a lot better. That one should be reviewed and studied and based on science, not on a rule made by maybe good, you know, information at the time, but I say that we need to re-look at that and see what you know, the aquifer and the septic system delivery systems are now, and see how effective they are. Because it could be that the septic systems nowadays could be filtering out, you know, pathogens and whatever, so that you know, you don't have that problem with your aquifer.
Okay. This actually is probably right up your alley. Do you believe nutrition and/or prevention should fill a bigger role in Panhandle Health's community education?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll give you some reasons besides all this that I've given you, and I've backed this thing up. You know, in my physiology classes, they said that, you know, your fat cells are developed actually during your adolescent years, then they stop. So if during your grade school years you have great nutrition, good education, make sure the people, the students understand there's a reason for being lean, but you need to give them some alternatives so that they'll actually adopt that. You produce fewer fat cells. So when you get older, with that finite number of fat cells, you're less likely to put on weight and become fatter. That's why if you go to a lot of countries, there's a lot of really lean people, and they eat a lot and they don't get fat. And part of that is your body mass, or that fat cell count at the adolescent age. The other thing is that I think you can, I'm on a school board, and I'm on their wellness committee, and we're encouraging the students to eat well. I mean, eat the proper nutritional foods. However, we need to go one step further, and that's to offer them choices that they actually like rather than dumping them all in the garbage can. And that's why I got back to these steak strips, because kids love jerky. And I think this jerky product can be very, very nutritionally packed, and the kids will love it. So they'll make an alternative to potato chips or French fries or something else. But I think that can be done in nursing homes and a lot of other places. One of the things that I was going to mention in here is spinach actually contains a steroid that converts fat to muscle. That's research coming out of Germany. It just happens a friend of mine is head of the USDA, FDA, and he's been here in Idaho actually and loves Hudson's. And he said to me, their studies, the German government was considering mandating that in nursing homes to keep the people leaner. And it's easy to incorporate that into something that tastes great so that, people stay leaner or get leaner. And protein actually doesn't add much. Matter of fact, it's an appetite depressant. So it's a great diet food. It's a terrific diet food.
It almost sounds like you're, if I could use the word, vindicating Dr. Atkins with the
I am.
high-protein diet?
Yes. There's a little more to it, but
Okay.
yes.
This is fascinating. Who would, presumably with as much research as you've done, where do you think on this earth we find the healthiest people? The healthiest diets, if you will, hence the healthiest
Well, they say the
populace.
Mediterranean diet, which is
Mediterranean.
high in polyunsaturated fats, and I agree with that. And of course, they eat a lot of tomatoes, high in lycopene. It makes sense. And of course, I do think in China, before they switched into our diet, and I just happened to have run into the Minister of Health for China in a conference. She asked me the first thing, I was, of course, talking about low sodium at that time. She asked me, what are you doing about obesity? Because that tends to be one of our biggest problems in China. And I thought about that, and then, I couldn't answer her question. But I do think I have an answer now.
Go ahead.
Well, I do think, we've actually made these protein strips down at Texas Tech, but we made them out of chicken. We can flavor it to taste like beef, pork, anything you want. Chicken is a third the cost of beef. We can fortify it because we do inject it with actually heart-healthy, FDA-qualified heart-healthy oils, mainly sunflower seed oil. And we can actually fortify it with vitamins, minerals. We can also fortify it with, the spinach I'm talking about. And we can make it taste absolutely terrific. Very, very savory. I mean, I'm a food technologist. I've got about 20,000 ingredients to choose from. I can easily inject it, fortify it, and make it actually taste great. And that's what you need for kids, something that really tastes great. They'll say, okay, I'll pick this instead of a potato chip.
Okay.
But I'd also like to go into nursing homes with this. If I'm on this thing, and if I can convince the rest of the board to do it, I would do some of this in nursing homes. Because I think you'll find that obesity is a problem throughout the community. And I think it's way undercounted.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a handout I have in here of all the diseases associated with obesity. I mean, just about everything you're talking about.
Thank you for that. Where are we?
I think it's Bill's turn.
Bill, go right ahead.
Just an aside to Chris. when you, out of these, how many different ingredients do you say you have at hand?
20,000.
And who tastes this? Do you taste this or somebody?
I taste it. I'm a formulator. You know.
Okay, all right.
So when I'm putting together these products, I've put together 90 products for Lighthouse up here. But I have to taste it, and I get the texture right. I've got to get the flavoring right. Sometimes nutrition.
And you worked for Sarah Lee too.
Yes, that's my dark ages. I also worked for McCain's, which is the largest French fry processor.
That's right.
The curly fries at
Arby's?
Arby's, my fault. Also, Burger King's French fries is my fault too. So I'm
Well,
trying to bait some of my sins in the past.
That's all right.
we'll get back to, I wanted to know, because I obviously am not a skinny mini. I used to be, 26 years old, BMI of 19.
Oof.
Today, BMI of over 40. And so I didn't have those fat cells, according to your theory, when I was 15, 16.
Right.
I don't know. Anyway, enough of that. What are some of the other duties besides mask mandates and things like that of Panhandle Health? What does the health district do or responsible for?
Well, I'm sure that as health issues come up, they come before the board. I've read through some of their notes on their meetings, but I think they're more of a reactive group rather than a proactive group. I know that, that study, the CHIP study, was, something they looked at and implement. But my guess is that outside forces come in and say, hey, listen, we'd like to have this, fixed or changed or.
Do you know any direct health care that they provide?
Well, they support immunization, that kind of thing. Not beyond that, no.
Any inspections that they do?
I'm not familiar with their inspections.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leslie?
Do you believe, or can you imagine a circumstance when mandating a vaccine could be necessary?
Yes, I do. I mean, especially if there's a virus or a bacteria out there that actually is deadly and starts killing people, I mean, in mass, yes, I would have to say yes, you'd have to mandate it. I mean, if the only way to stop something that's going to wipe you out anyway, yes, I would mandate a vaccine.
So it wouldn't be up to the individual to take their chance with the potential virus or bacteria. You would say, no, you have to have the vaccine
Well, I
to
think
save
they become,
yourself.
then you're saying, hey, if this thing is, let's say, 90% lethal, and you become a carrier, you're going to carry it on to somebody else and pass it along. I'd say at that point, you probably have to mandate getting vaccinated. The question is how lethal the microbe is.
Yeah. Okay. Your preferred method of communication, if you're selected, you would be representing us on the board, Kootenai County. How would you prefer to communicate with us? Is it text, is it email, is it by phone? What's your preference?
I like text
Okay,
or email, either one.
okay. Any other questions?
Yep, I'm good.
Go ahead.
My last one.
Yeah, go.
About stem cells. There is recognized stem cell, treatments that are going on that have been proved. How do you feel about other therapies that are being advertised?
I think, well, of course, I work with FDA a lot. And as long as it's past FDA, it's not, going to cause harm. And that's what they look for. Or mutagenic, causes cancer. I think it's terrific. I think that's the next big frontier is stem cells, which of course are cells that don't have a purpose until you give it a purpose. I think it's terrific. I think it's absolutely terrific.
Still very much in the developmental stage, though, isn't it? Or is it?
No, I think it's passed on to that. I mean, the genetics piece of this thing is so terrific. I mean, I was knee-deep in genetics as I went along, but they're way beyond me. Gene splicing, and they can build tons of stuff into, well, they're doing it for crops, of course.
Sure.
First thing they did is they put lysine into corn and rice. They've fortified. This is a pretty good science. It's a pretty solid science.
Okay. Leslie, anything else?
No.
Do you have any questions for us?
Can I talk about a little bit about
Yeah,
what?
go right ahead.
The other thing I was talking about is that, and this is where I've got all this backup information, is that, other countries also recognize protein supplements as a way to lose weight. And I gave examples there of South Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, Australia. They see that as a way of weight control. I'm working with a group called Cactus Feeders. They're the second largest feedlot operators in the United States. They've come to Texas Tech and they said, hey, listen, we have a philanthropic group and dedication here. We want to make product, and they loved these steak strips that we made down there. And they said, we want to make those for Feed the Hungry, and we're going to do that free. We're going to pass that out as protein, and it has to be chicken. So that was great. I love to hear that. So what I like to do is hook that up with the nursing homes and our school systems here, and see if I can get the Cactus Feeders to provide that resource free here. And I can customize these products so that they taste great for elderly people because they want a little hyped up flavor, or to the school system so that the kids love a variety of flavors. So I'd like to see that come about so that the kids have a chance to, lean up and eat healthy, eat healthier. And I mentioned that I'm on our wellness committee, and the kids there said, we love jerky. We love it. And the USDA has put it on their preferred list for their school lunch program. So then I would, again, these chicken strips are going to cost about a fourth. Oh, the other thing is that I can do chicken strips from beginning to end in 2 hours. This takes 1 to 3 days to make. So the cost of making them is just a fraction of making these steak strips. So this is a really, really low-cost protein source. I've just finished making a plant-based version of this using pea protein, but it costs just as much as beef. It's not as chicken's cheaper. The other thing I would recommend is that there's a regional culinary chef. Students like some things that they don't like another. When I was in this, we had our meeting about a week ago, and the kids said, well, we don't like Brussels sprouts, we don't like this, we don't like that, but we do like broccoli if you season them properly. Okay. We'll eat it. Otherwise, which made me think, what, I came out of the food industry, so taste means everything. It trumps nutrition, it trumps everything else. If you had a culinary chef for the region who would actually work on these meals for kids, for their lunch and breakfast, to make them taste better but be more nutritional too, so that they don't end up dumping so much. The other thing is that this is something that's really new, is probiotics. That's the right bacteria in your intestinal tract. They've actually identified research that the bacteria in your intestinal tract actually send signals to your brain saying, I want sugar. And you can get away from that. If you rebuild that intestinal tract bacterial load, you can actually get one that's not begging for these cravings. So I think that's something that should be investigated. The other thing, this is from the Stratum Nutrition. It says virtually all the most prevalent chronic diseases that plague modern society including obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease. Many cancers can be classified as inflammatory disorders arising from an impaired immune system, often caused by alterations in gut microflora. So you can't, the other thing is that's in here is actually, there's a number of food items that are terrific anti-inflammatory products. And you just build them into your system. I know they want to be cheap, but maybe we should emphasize more nutrition than being cheap. And put those
Can you
anti-inflammatory.
name a few?
Tart cherries are terrific. Athletes, when they exercise, you actually tear bits of your muscle.
Yes.
And the way they recover on that is they actually have tart cherry juice. I mean, there's study after study after study showing that it really works for them. Your recovery time is so much faster because it reduces the inflammation. Okay. Inflammation also gives you joint pains, arthritis, all sorts of things. So you need those anti-inflammatories. Cinnamon is a very powerful antioxidant. Okay. Glutathione, I know that probably never heard of it. Wonderful savory agent. Tastes absolutely terrific. What?
Say it again.
Glutathione. You can get pills. You can go to a health food store and pick up glutathione pills. Okay. That's probably the most powerful antioxidant out there. And of course, vitamin E, green tea extract. When I formulate products like this, I put green tea extract in there. Rosemary extract, terrific antioxidants. Okay. The other thing I would recommend is that the Panhandle Health District endorse healthy food products. This is something they're not doing now, but they could probably help boost people's awareness of what's really good, what's going to be good for them. The other is, and this has been a pet project for mine since I've been on the school board, I can't change it. The policy is a half-hour a week physical education. CDC recommends an hour a day. State of Washington mandates an hour a day. Our State Board of Education has filled the curriculum up so that you only have a half an hour a week in the elementary school. And it's like, it does increase when you're in high school, junior high and high school, even in our school. You get 6 months of 3 hours a week. But that should be higher. That should be much better. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's study after study after study showing that if you have physical education, children pick up their metabolism and they go back and they learn better. So I think physical education should be on that list.
Okay.
And I've got all the backup data if
Thank
you want to
you.
just kind of peruse through that. And that's actually the number one trend. And I gave you a handout. This is, of course, I subscribe to about 24 magazines. Food technology is the one for the food industry. In the top 10 food trends, number one is medical foods. Just like I was talking to you about anti-inflammatories, there are more. Cognitive health, a whole host of things that they're addressing right now. They know health is a major issue in the United States. So the food industry is finally catching on.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate your time. This was very informative. Anything else? Leslie, Bill?
No, good.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
We'll be making a decision, if not this week, certainly next week, and you will obviously be informed. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. Have a good day. Okay. Did you want to take a break, or do you want to proceed?
Go ahead.
Keep
as far as I'm
going?
concerned.
Okay. Dr. Duke Johnson. Let me see if he's out there. We just took a brief unannounced recess. Okay, so you must be Dr. Duke Johnson.
I am.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We have a series of interviews, I believe it's 6 in all. We will likely be making the decision, if not later this week, certainly next week. The position, it's a single position that is available, and typically the commitment is somewhere around 9 to 10 meetings per year, unless a situation arises and special meetings are called for. Those meetings will typically run about an hour to an hour and a half, so I assume that's not a problem for you.
Not a problem.
Okay, so we have your resume, we've reviewed it. What else would you like to share with us? Go right ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I think from the point that I'd like to make is that what I bring to the table is a global experience with previous experience in advising a multi-billion-dollar company and their customers, which I was reported to be 3 million customers in the United States and 3 million customers plus internationally, on how to deal with SARS-1 and H1N1 pandemics previously. And fortunately, my experience in that time period translated into a positive experience for the company, because obviously being in a position of representing a large corporation, you need to know your data, and you need to be able to approach the CDC and World Health Organization data in a investigative way, because there's a lot of different influences on that data, and so I think that I bring to the table extensive experience, which I think I could really benefit for the people of North Idaho. Having been born and raised in North Idaho, I love the people, I love this area, and my passion in life has been to save lives. That's why I became interested in emergency medicine. And in that pursuit, and in my responsibility of being medical director of Neutralite Health Institute, to show my willingness to pursue, excuse me, I'm sorry. Oh, what a time to get a spam. I'm going to try to turn this off. I have to wait till the phone call finishes. I'm sorry. But in my responsibilities with the corporation, what I was called to do is to travel then to different locations around the world that were quite dangerous. And they didn't require that I did, but affiliates around the world would request that I would come there to help teach them about preventive medicine. And so I have traveled and spoken into places such as Venezuela, when the State Department advised that no American go in at that time, but I went in because the people were requesting it. And Hugo Chavez was leading the country at that time, and the State Department said, if you get arrested, we cannot get you out. We don't recommend anyone go in.
Excuse me, who were you representing?
I was representing Neutralite Corporation, which is a subsidiary of the Amway Corporation. Neutralite is the largest, till today, the largest manufacturer of supplements in the world. And during my tenure there, their annual volume went from $750 million in annual sales to $4.7 billion when I left. We were there during a tremendous growth phase, and I also spoke in El Salvador and had to be driven by M13 areas in order to get in to speak. The hotel I stayed at in Colombia was, I noticed that some people came out with dogs, and a gentleman dressed like the Michelin Man to inspect our van. I asked why he was doing that, and they said, "Oh, your hotel was bombed last year." And so in other words, I've been to a lot of places around the world because of my passion for saving lives. And so I'm passionate about North Idaho, so that's why I'm here.
Fair enough. Thank you. So we've got some questions for you. Leslie?
What is the role of the Panhandle Health District's board?
I perceive that the role of the board is to provide solid science in order to help make community decisions so that people can best know how to protect their health from a wide variety of health issues and problems. And it should be experts who are informed as to how to help point the community in the right direction. And I know that that translates over to others.
Okay. Do you know where their funding comes from?
No, I do not.
Bill?
How do you feel about, we've recently been mask mandate all over the news, especially here in Kootenai County. How do you feel about Panhandle Health issuing a mask mandate?
Well, I think that it would be best to take a look at it from a historical perspective, honestly, and a global perspective, rather than an immediate, local perspective. And that's what actually interested me in this position, was because my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer 3 years ago, and because of the mandates and the policies that were administered, she was unable to get breast cancer treatment for 4 months. And what I was able to do, because of my experience with dealing and wading through World Health Organization and CDC information, I was able, and I've got documented proof of this, that when people were talking about a 9% death rate in March 16th of last year, I was able to wade through and found out that it was a 0.26 is what I arrived at death rate from all of the available data at that time. And what I could see from that was that and that was what was known, and that death rate actually the CDC confirmed in May, 3 months later. And so my thought was, if I can wade through this and find that the true death rate is 0.26, why isn't the CDC able to find that same data? And so it was the mandates based upon a 9% death rate that completely blocked out and inhibited treatment and care for people like my mother. And so I thought, if I can see this, why can't they see that? And prior to February of last year, masks have never been shown in research prior to February of last year to ameliorate disease. If anything, they can even augment them. And so there's a study done from the British Medical Journal in 2018, done among health professionals, that actually masks were shown to actually even increase the risk. In fact, for people who had cloth masks, there was an increased risk of influenza.
So it sounds like you're against the mask mandate.
I'm not, as a set policy, not against anything. Okay, so but it needs to do is it needs to stand up to scientific standards. There might be some
mandates that you would be in favor of then.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. Each case is different. Each virus is a different size. Both flu and coronaviruses are 0.12 microns. Smallpox is a different size. Ebola is a different size. So, I mean, it all has to do based upon the science.
Very good.
Thank you.
So then you don't have a problem with surgeons wearing masks?
Of course not. I've assisted in hundreds of surgeries.
Okay.
But the purpose for a surgeon wearing a mask, for example, is that it's 10 microns diameter is what they're able to limit. Coronaviruses and flu viruses are 0.12 microns. The holes are 100 times bigger. There's a dual purpose when you're in surgery. If you've ever stood at an operating table, sometimes arteries are hit. And so blood squirts. I know people don't like to talk about that, but it happens. And so to protect the people standing at the operating table, you don't want to have their blood squirting into your face. And so that's one reason for that protection, and certainly the masks are able to protect. The other hand is that you've got an open wound in front of you, and if you cough into that open wound, that's where they were designed. But the study done in 2018 in the British Medical Journal was done among health professionals, looking at, did masks reduce flu virus infections? And what they found was, in fact, not only didn't they, but there was a 13 times increase in infection among those health professionals who wore masks trying to prevent influenza. And both coronavirus and influenza are 0.12 microns, same size.
So if we take the roughly 550,000 deaths attributable to the coronavirus, if you were the czar, so to speak, the healthcare czar for the U.S., how would you have mitigated? Obviously, nobody could have known that it was going to take that many lives, but how would you have mitigated that?
Have
I
you
mean,
ever?
absent the vaccine, which wasn't around at the time.
Right,
Okay, go ahead.
right. Well, see, here's where historical perspective is priceless.
Go ahead.
I advised the corporation of millions of people on how to approach SARS-1. There's no virus in the world closer to SARS-2 than SARS-1. And I don't know if you're familiar with what happened with SARS-1, but it was in 2003, I believe, 2002 and 2003. It had a much higher death rate, by the way. That truly was a 9 to 11% death rate.
Okay.
It ran its normal curve of 7 to 8 months. It went away spontaneously and has never been seen anywhere in the world since 2006.
Go ahead.
Okay? So, in other words, why would anyone believe that SARS-2 would behave any differently than SARS-1?
So when you
Now,
say SARS-2, you're referring to COVID?
yeah, because COVID-19 is SARS-CoV-2.
Thank you.
They are identical. They essentially, there's just a few differences in the genome, but very, very, very similar.
Okay.
Same spike, same everything. Okay, so why would anyone feel that anyone would do anything differently? So I went investigatively. In fact, this is a quick point. I just wanted to show you this because I'm not one who runs around tooting horns, but I wrote this book in 2009. And it has had tens of thousands of copies published and translated into 9 languages. That book came from me thinking outside the box. And the underlying premise of the book is that inflammation is the root cause of all chronic disease, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, et cetera, et cetera. It was way ahead of its time. My oldest daughter went through medical school at Creighton, and she said, "Daddy, they're teaching now in medical school what your book said years ago." So in other words, I do what I do because I have to be ahead of the time. My whole life I've been ahead of the time. That's how I could lead a multi-billion-dollar corporation, be medical director of them. And so what most people don't do, I do. I think outside the box. So when you talk about the number of deaths, you have to look at, I don't know if you've ever heard of Corman-Drosten paper, okay? The Corman-Drosten paper is incredibly important because the PCR test is 100% dependent upon the Corman-Drosten test, okay? Corman and Drosten submitted that test to Euromonitor in February of last year. They were the two lead authors. They were editors of the journal. They submitted it, and the next day it was accepted. And they said, this is how we check for coronavirus. And what they had also done is they had put, they had agreements with laboratories, and they had already had testing materials sitting in labs before their paper was even published. Still today, when you get a PCR test, it's based upon the Corman-Drosten paper. Highly biased, based on 2 gentlemen who were on a board. So now, when they created that PCR test, they could have looked at what is called the N gene. I don't know if anyone's talked to you about the N gene, N as in Nancy or N as in Nevada. The N gene is the distinctive gene that separates SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, from all other coronaviruses. The PCR test today that you would get, if you got a PCR test today, it does not check for the N gene. It does not check for that gene. So in other words, what it does, and normally in a test like that, you would check from the genome, one side of the genome, middle, and the far side. That's been standard ever since PCR tests were created. This current test tests in 2 locations only, so it can't distinguish between what is live and not live virus. Because you would assume if you can detect a full virus genome, the test gets the third, the whole length. So if you can see all 3, then you've got a live one probably.
Let me just quickly take, because we need to get back on track, but you made a comment before embarking on your latest point, something about inflammation is the cause of?
Essentially all chronic disease.
All chronic disease.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the reason that it's important is that there are 7 coronaviruses that infect humans. 4 of them are endemic that cause colds. Everyone in this room has massive amounts of the 4 coronaviruses, okay? There are 3 additional coronaviruses, SARS-1 that we talked about from 2003 and 4, that no one has seen since 2006, SARS-CoV-2, which is going around today, and MERS, okay? So, and MERS died out too, okay? Same way that SARS-CoV-1 did, okay? So, so in other words, this test, since it didn't check for the N gene, cannot distinguish between SARS-CoV-2 and an endemic coronavirus that you have from a cold. It cannot.
Okay, thank you. We're
So-
going to try to
so-
get back on track.
Well, no, but see, this is answering your question. I may not be clear. When you say 500,000 cases, it's 500,000 cases without an N gene. We don't know that that was really truly SARS-CoV-2. So when people turn positive, I'm right spot on to your answer. I'm right back to where you're saying, and I may not be doing a good job of explaining it. I'm sorry, but
No, you're doing a great
we're
job.
we're talking strong science, right? I'm sorry, but
No, you're a scientist. That's perfectly fine. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and I'm trying to, but see, when they say 500,000 cases, that means 500,000 people tested positive for a coronavirus that wasn't distinctive to SARS-CoV-2.
Okay, fair enough.
So when you keep cycling them, you're going to keep cycling, and eventually everyone on the planet, if you cycle over 30, everyone on the planet, because you're multiplying these viruses, everyone on the planet is going to turn positive because everyone on the planet has an endemic cold coronavirus.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry, I mean,
you don't have
you
to
know, you're giving me
apologize.
30 minutes and I'm trying to get as much
wait,
information to you as I can.
I think you're the 3rd physician, and this has been a real education certainly for me, I imagine for all of us. But anyway, okay, so where did we leave off? The 5-acre minimum?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, what do you think about the 1 septic system per 5-acre minimum rule over the aquifer?
The 5-acre minimum over the aquifer for a well?
Septic system.
For a septic system. You know, I'm not as versed on that as well.
Okay.
I know that it would have to relate back to the bacteria that we're seeing. It'd have to relate back to the problems that are occurring as we increase with population in the area. There's obviously going to be more of a stringent monitoring to make sure that as that population increases, that these bacteria aren't getting through, absolutely.
Okay. And I think you probably started to answer this, but do you believe that nutrition and/or prevention should fill a bigger role in Panhandle Health's community education?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay.
In fact, I have I have the company that I have created is a company that is starting off with a complete nutritional transition, because much of what we've been told, most people have found that what was used in the past has been a failure. They go to diets, which are temporary fixes and fads. They have temporary benefits, and then they eventually plateau, quit, and balloon back up again. And I just like everything else, I tossed out everything that I ever learned about nutrition and created this program a year and a half ago, and basically found out that it involved 30 fields of science for me to go into and investigate, because including herbicides and in essence, I'm just blocking on the term right now, but hybridization, you know, like how plants are grown, amylase trypsin inhibitors, which have been brought into plants that are natural pesticides, that they increase yield, but they increase inflammation. So farmers are able to grow massively larger amounts of wheat and all kinds of product, et cetera. But what they're doing though is increasing inflammation, and inflammation in the digestive tract breaks down barriers in the digestive tract, allows gut leakage of contents that are in the digestive tract, causing inflammation throughout the body. And most people don't understand that, and it's from our diet. So there is 100 miles more advanced data out there on diets than most people teach.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
Yes, other than the mask mandates or unmandates or whatever, what are some of the other duties of Panhandle Health?
I see Panhandle Health as I've always kind of witnessed that area in which I've been involved in, as I mentioned with the in my application, when I became an emergency physician in Southern California, I was having teenage suicides come into the emergency room, which passionately affected me. To have a 14-year-old come in who just tried to kill himself is very hard for an emergency physician, because you've got a busy emergency room. I was one doctor who had 50 patients coming in at St. Jude Hospital in Fullerton, California. And you don't have time to sit down and say, you know, you shouldn't be here. Why are you here? What can I do? Et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I went out to high schools to teach. And so with what has occurred in our society, you know, being on that forefront of helping with, you know, all aspects of health, not only what we've been talking about, but certainly with reducing drug abuse and addiction. Most of the reasons why people will get into a concept of feeling that they need to kill themselves is multifactorial. There's problems with breakdown in the family, problems with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, et cetera, et cetera.
But what other duties currently does Panhandle Health provide to our community?
I would imagine that they're involved with, you know, I don't know completely everything they're involved with. I certainly can learn about that. I'm not too concerned, because I've had 150,000 patient visits, you know, with patients, but I would imagine they also are involved with vaccine implementation and basic care, nutrition, you know, neonatal care is what I imagine, but I'm not 100% sure.
Thank you.
Leslie?
Can you imagine a circumstance when mandating a vaccine could be necessary?
You know, we've never, to my knowledge, ever mandated a vaccine. I can imagine that that's probably occurred with maybe, they've tried different things like with smallpox, et cetera, but what's happened where this vaccine is completely different is that the messenger RNA vaccines have been around for about 35 years, and they've been unable to get out of animal trials. And I don't know if you're familiar with or heard about the animal trials that have gone on for 35 years concerning messenger RNA, but basically what happened is that what the messenger RNA does is that, and I can draw this out, but what a messenger RNA is like the blueprint for the cytoplasm of the cell to make those crowns that make it a coronavirus, the spikes. And so what that does is that it's making the cell produce spikes and telling the immune system, oh, these spikes are foreign. Well, normally if you just put in a vaccine into someone, you've got broken pieces of a vaccine, the immune system sees those broken pieces, sets up an immunity, and you don't need to do anything beyond that. Well, in these, what happens is the vaccine continues to make spikes, and whether the immune system has set up a reaction to it or not, it continues to make them. Some people have said they stopped making them in 72 hours, but there's no documented proof of that. I've searched the literature. I'd love to see an example of that. But what had happened to the animals was that about 8 to 10 months later, when they were exposed to what is called a wild coronavirus, and I can bring in papers documenting all of this. When they were exposed to a wild coronavirus, they had an enhanced reaction, which was called antibody dependent enhancement. So in other words, when they were exposed to a wild coronavirus, because coronaviruses are ubiquitous, they're everywhere, those that weren't vaccinated kind of got a little bit sick but recovered. Those that had been vaccinated had a massive reaction. It was an enhanced reaction, and they died, the vast majority of the animals. And they did these on you know, cats primarily, and they never were able to get out of animal trials to bring it to human trials. And they've been trying for 35 years to do that. On these vaccines, they skipped animal trials because it was an emergency, reportedly. And so I'm not worried about people.
Excuse me, Dr.
We're just going to close.
We're just shutting the door.
Oh, no, yeah, no problem.
Right ahead.
I'm not concerned about people reacting to the vaccines today. The animals didn't have problems with when the vaccine was initially given. Where people had trouble, where the animals had trouble were 6 months and a year later.
Okay.
So to mandate something that it is not been able to get out of human trials, or get out of animal trials, is very, very risky, number one. It kind of reminds me of thalidomide. I don't know if you remember thalidomide or have ever heard of that. But when I just got out of medical school, every female who came in, we asked them, did you or your mother or your grandmother ever have thalidomide? Because it was supposedly a wonder drug for taking out nausea during pregnancy. But gee, we didn't find out that it caused serious congenital malformations until the second or third generation. And there have been a lot of times in science where, see, I know enough about medicine to know that not everything is wonder drug. Not everything is perfect. I've stood at over 1,000 surgeries assisting because, when I had a family practice of 8,000 patients. And during that time period, I mean, not everything is a wonder drug. Not everything is simple. Not everything is without side effects. And so I think that to mandate things before they're fully tested could be a grave danger.
Okay. I do have, I guess, a simple question.
Okay.
If you're the individual chosen or selected to represent us on the board, what is your preferred method of communication with us? That is to say, phone, email, text, what do you prefer?
I actually prefer, well, I'm open to everything because I've done everything, but I actually, as far as with you guys, I'm more interested in direct communication because or in the form of an email. Texts, I can't adequately explain a position very well in text, and it takes so long. But either email if you need a detailed answer, or personally, because that's my forte. That's how I went from. When I was representing the company, it was because of my personality, and all of these different countries, it's because of my ability to orally communicate.
Okay. Do you have any questions for us?
Bill's got one more.
Oh, I thought we did the last one. Oh, okay, I know which one you have left.
He's trying to
looking at the time
take
as
one
well.
away. I don't know.
What am I, chopped liver?
Stem cells.
Stem cells.
Okay.
I know that there's some applications where stem cells have been proven as good and beneficial. There are others where they have not. How do you feel about stem cells and advertising them for what range of conditions?
It's really interesting because I have seen some of that in the literature, and actually what my interest was to attend a stem cell presentation because I wanted to hear how it was presented, what they said, and what was available. And I actually had an appointment last spring that was canceled because of COVID. So I would be able to have answered that question much more thoroughly had I had an opportunity to be there because I know that there are some there are some benefits and some positives. Again, you can get stem cells from a lot of different locations. You can get them from bone marrow. You can get them from cord blood. There's lots of places where you can get them, and I can see where there is potential in the future if we are just careful with how we approach things. I mean, because I think that no matter how good medicine becomes, it's good to have everyone's perspective in mind so that everybody feels comfortable that, wow, we haven't changed our science recommendations back and forth a million times. This is good, solid stuff. We're moving forward. We feel confident about the people who are telling us this.
Have you seen some of the ads locally for full-page ads for stem cell therapy, where they take your own stem cells and inject them into different parts of your body?
Yes, I have. And that, I think, has tremendous potential, depending. Now, what's interesting, in the literature I've seen, and I apologize, because I'm studying a lot of stuff, and I'm like an insatiable reader. I never get tired, because to me, I feel as if I'm a prospector finding a little nugget of gold. To me, it's just fun, or a detective going after a mystery, solving a mystery. I mean, I never tire of learning. But that one I put on the shelf because it was like, well, until I can get in there with them. But What's interesting, though, what I've seen in the literature so far, it hasn't been, it makes sense, but it hasn't necessarily been an enduring treatment per se, that sometimes they seem to need follow-up treatments from what I understand right now. I mean, so again, I'm not an
That's good.
authority,
No,
but
that's good. That's very
Yeah.
clear. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you. Do you have questions of us?
Not really. Yeah, because what you've been put into a position of authority, you've been put into a position of making this decision. And what my role was to offer my services, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know if I'm old enough to remember when cigarette companies used to use doctors to advertise cigarettes. I don't know if you guys, okay, well.
Sorry, but yeah.
And there is tremendous, I've been trained by some of the most brilliant people in the world, literally. At UCLA, I had a terrific education, and I could go on and on and on, talk about the people who I was fortunate enough to be trained under. But I also know that scientists are humans. They sometimes get influenced by things they shouldn't get influenced by. And for me, my passion is the purity of saving lives. That's my passion. And so irrespective of everything else. So it doesn't bother me to disagree with the norms. It doesn't bother me because I want to be someone who stands up for truth. I want to be someone who stands up so that people can say, well, this is what Dr. Duke said, and I think we can rely upon that. And that's what happened at Nutralite Health Institute. Globally, people relied upon us. And so my role is, that's what I'm presenting today, and I'm just trusting that you guys will choose what is best for Kootenai County and what's best for the people here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time.
You bet.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
I sure will.
Appreciate it. Very, very informative.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have furthered our education today.
Well, I'm sorry I went fast, but
No, that's fine, perfectly fine. Thank you.
You betcha.
How does it feel to be on your way toward a medical degree? Jeez. No, however you're comfortable. I'm Chris. Good to meet you. Good to meet you.
Me too, Bill Brooks.
Okay. I believe you're our finalist. Well, you're all finalists, but you're you're the last one to be
Okay,
interviewed.
you're like,
There were
oh,
six-
well,
There were 6 interviews.
good for you guys. I'm sure you're ready.
Anyway, so we've reviewed your resume. The situation is this: there's one opening, and we'll be making a decision, if not later this week, certainly next week, and everybody will be informed. Obviously, the chosen one, as well as the folks that also competed. The way Panhandle Health operates, they run typically 9 to 10 meetings a year, typically an hour to an hour and a half, and typically over lunch. So I bring that up so that if there's a potential conflict, we know it up front. You're okay with that, I presume?
I am.
Okay.
I'm retired, so I have much more flexibility in my schedule now.
Okay. So go right ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We've got your resume. If there's anything you want to add, and then we'll have some questions for you.
Okay, great. A little bit about myself. Well, I grew up in the Coeur d'Alene area. I actually was born in Coeur d'Alene, so an original from the area, and lived here for about 20 years, then moved away for about 20 years, and then we were able to move back about 21 years ago and have been here since. So love the area, obviously. I have a passion and a commitment to our community, and because of that history. And we have like 4 generations of family here, so we're pretty ingrained in the community. Let's see, what else would be pertinent to you guys? I have my Bachelor of Science degree in nursing, and I got that about 36 years ago. That's hard to believe. I think I'm 36 still, but apparently
Okay.
not. So anyway, 36 years ago, I've worked in a variety of areas in healthcare, mostly acute care, obviously, when you're nursing, that's where the majority of nursing is. Actually, not anymore, but used to be. So I've worked in med-surg, worked in ER most recently, really enjoyed that as a house supervisor. Did that for several years, and then I was down at Gritman Medical Center working there, and one of the faculty from Lewis Clark State College said, have you considered education? So that made me start looking at education, and moved into that role. And when we moved up here, I decided to go back and get my master's degree in nursing education. And then in 2005, started teaching at NIC. And then the last 4 years I was there, I took the role as the director of the nursing program. After that, about a year and a half ago, I retired from that position, retired from full-time work, and I did work kind of a transition job, half-time, with Clinical Placements Northwest. That role is kind of the liaison between the nursing colleges in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene and Lewiston, and the hospitals in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene, in the liaison in placing students in clinical experiences. So I did that online mostly for about a year and a half, and then in November of last year, I fully retired. So since then, I've been kind of thinking about, well, what do I want to do? How do I want to give back to the community, and how do I want to be engaged and involved, which led me to looking at this board seat.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we have some questions for you,
Okay.
and Leslie will lead us off.
Sure. What is the role of Panhandle Health District's board?
Well, I see the board as advisory and leadership in the health of our community. I did get on the website. I had my picture of what it was involved with. As a matter of fact, when I was a nursing student in Portland, I spent some time in their district health department with their WIC program, educating some of the community members. So I had an idea, but when I got on the website, I was surprised how broad that is. So, so I see that as leadership. I see it as leadership by example. I see it as advisory. I also think it's a learning opportunity, for board members. I don't know a lot about water safety or septic, so that part would be a learning opportunity. But I would hope that it would be an opportunity also to influence and impact the health and the safety of our community and the decisions, obviously, that board, sometimes very tough decisions that board has to make in leading the community.
Okay. Do you have any idea where their funding comes from?
State funding, and I assume federal funding. But other than that, I don't know.
Okay. Actually, we provide quite a bit too,
Oh, okay.
to the tune of, what is it, 800,000?
So pretty good chunk.
Yeah, pretty good chunk
Yeah.
comes from the county, yeah.
Well, and I do see that as part of the role as well, is that budgeting and advisory about the budget. I think, I would hope that the director comes to you and gives you an idea of what their budget plans are. And then, and one of the big roles I think of any committee or advisory board is asking the right questions,
Okay, Bill?
Been in the news a lot, mask mandates. Do you believe in mask mandates or not? And if so, or if not, why?
There's the loaded question, isn't it? First of all, I really respect the health board. That was a tough, and for you guys as well. I think you've all been through the heat, and it's been a challenging time. What kind of vote I would have made had I been on the board at the time? Honestly, I evaluated that myself, and I thought, I can't say for sure because I wasn't in those shoes. I wasn't privy to the information that you guys had and the input that you had from the community. That being said, for me, for my family, we did choose to wear masks, and we chose that various reasons. Obviously, I'm healthcare providers, so I do believe that they make a difference in protecting people. I don't know about you guys, but since we've been wearing masks and washing our hands more and isolating, I haven't had a cold in over a year. So, and as a nurse, I know we used to gown up and wear a mask when you went in a room with a patient that had an infectious disease, because it works. We know that it protects you.
Would you believe in a hand washing mandate?
Hand washing, could you enforce that?
Well, can you enforce the other one?
Yeah, exactly, which I know was part of the issue. So, hand washing mandate, that's an interesting.
You don't need to, that's just,
Yeah, I totally believe in it, yes. And I totally think people should be doing, to me, that's like, well, that's common sense, so we all do that all the time, but, I think telling people that they need to wash their hands, yeah, are they going to get a ticket for not? I mean, I know that's the big back and forth that you go with. But those are the tough calls.
Leslie?
What do you think about the one septic system per 5-acre minimum rule over the aquifer?
Oh my gosh, you are out of my league here with that kind of question. I will be honest with you. I guess I would have questions before I would be able to answer that. Like, what is the normal amount? What is the appropriate number that should be? How does that affect the communities? I would definitely have some questions with concerns being over the aquifer, as I think we all do. But to answer that, I would need more knowledge to answer that. It's funny that you would say that after I just said, I know really not a lot about septic or water. That would be a learning curve.
Sure.
As it is for most people, actually.
Yeah, as long as they work, we're happy usually.
Yep, no, that's true. Do you believe nutrition and/or prevention should fill a bigger role in Panhandle Health's community education?
Attrition, you said?
Nutrition.
Oh,
Nutrition, I'm
nutrition.
sorry, yeah, nutrition.
Nutrition and, I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah, do you believe that nutrition or prevention should play a bigger role in their community education, in their
Absolutely.
outreach?
Absolutely, yes,
Okay.
I do. I think that we haven't even begun to touch what we know about how our health is affected by our food and the things we eat. And I know that a lot of people do not have the money and cannot afford to eat healthy, and I do believe that that is probably a wonderful area. I'm a big promoter of education. I believe in it, obviously. I've spent time in it, a lot of my career in it, and I think it's very valuable. And I would be interested in seeing that.
Okay. Bill?
Other than considering mask mandates and other mandates, do you know some of the other duties that Panhandle Health is currently involved in the community?
I do. I am familiar with several of their programs. Matter of fact, Laura Whalen, who obviously the director, sat on our advisory committee for our nursing program at NIC. So I am familiar with a lot of the activities that they're involved in. I honestly think the mask mandate and the whole mask thing, it's a big thing right now, but it's going to, we hope it's going to reside. It's going to go away. And what do we look at after that? And we look at the safety, obviously water safety, but the health of our community as a whole. Mental health is a big concern, and I know there's been a lot of work done in that area. I know that Claudia Mywald has done a wonderful job leading and spearheading that crisis center, and I think that's an important aspect of some of the work that the Panhandle Health and the board is involved in as well. One of my concerns that, and I'm not sure how much the board is involved in, is the ongoing bringing in of healthcare providers into our community, because I see that as a health concern. We do not have enough healthcare providers, physicians and nurses, and how can we help promote that in our community, because I think that's going to have a strong trickle-down effect.
Thank you.
I know they're involved in WIC, I know they're involved in tobacco safety, or tobacco abstinence, nutrition, as you mentioned, I know is an aspect of it. I know they do a lot with women's health and children, which is wonderful, immunization clinics, so many. Like I said, when I got on that website, I knew most of those, but it was much broader than I anticipated, which is kind of exciting.
And it's interesting, I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I was going to say thank you. I think your restaurant,
Yes, I saw that. Food safety
food safety.
as
but
well. I was
to be
curious.
proactive in that arena as opposed to reactive.
So how's the board involved with that, or are they?
Not the board.
We? Or
No,
you, or
the
their
health
board? Oh,
board.
their board?
At Panhandle Health, they have people who,
Go out and do
Yeah.
the safety checks and that kind of thing, and then report back.
Okay. It's interesting when you mention the need for greater healthcare providers. Sadly, we rank, if not at, near the bottom in we have one of the lowest ratios of doctors to patients, to population, excuse me, and that is a problem. I'm glad you cited that. Anyway, go ahead, Leslie.
Can you imagine a circumstance when mandating a vaccine could be necessary?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about it. already, or even with travel or that kind of thing. Mandating a vaccine, I could see would be very difficult to do, as you know. And there's people that don't get regular immunization, so to mandate a vaccine would be very difficult. Herd immunity would be our best bet that we could come up with. I think there are situations where they may mandate a vaccine, as in travel or certain activities that you might do where they might require a vaccine. Quite honestly, I think it's highly unlikely that that is going to happen. Broad spectrum would be my doubt. Did I get my vaccine? I did. I'm glad I didn't get the Johnson & Johnson. There are new reports on that.
Okay. What is your, if you're the individual selected, what's your preferred method for communicating with us? Us, meaning this board. Would it be written, oral, email, text? What do you prefer? What's your preferred method?
Well, I guess I would turn that back on you guys and say what you prefer. You're in the busier roles. I like email for quick and easy communications. I'm fine with texting. There are times when I think a verbal conversation is important, especially if it's something that has more detail or even some kind of emotion to it. It's good to just talk verbally. But for quick, easy communications, email, texting works well.
Okay. Bill?
Stem cells. How do you feel about some of the uses of stem cells in therapy today, and the advertisement of stem cell therapy, its efficacy? And
Well, that's an interesting question that I hadn't really thought about. I think that's a good question. You know, we've made so much progress in healthcare, so much progress, and it is to our benefit. There are people that really benefit from stem cell therapy. It's scary what it could lead to, but I would hate to see us limit our growth and progress in medicine for fear of what it could lead to. So, you know, I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think with anything, you have to lead cautiously.
have you seen some of the full-page ads advertising relief for knee and joint injuries?
Relief for what?
Knee, joint, hip, back injuries?
With the stem cell?
Yeah.
I haven't followed it closely. So I have to say I haven't followed it closely, but that's interesting that you bring it up, and it is something to look into.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? How about questions for us?
How about what?
Questions for us. What would you like to ask us?
Well, I guess I would be curious, as I mentioned before, I do see that the pandemic's going to reside, and there are going to be new issues that crop up or things that are concerns for the community and the health. I'm curious what you guys see in the next few years, as far as you can tell, that would be items that would need to be addressed by the health department.
Who wants to go?
I would say that nutrition and prevention, because if we do have a low doctor to population ratio, that I think that'd be a huge focus, and starting, you know, with our younger kids and doing that, but just really getting better out. Even though we have a short growing season here, there's an abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables available through farmers markets and stuff like that. So I would like to see more education on prevention of disease and just really bolstering immunity systems.
And how do we get that in the right hands, too, those fruits and vegetables? Yeah, I think that's an excellent direction and involvement for the board.
Yeah, if it were up to me, I would like to see a lot more collaborative relationship between the community and the Panhandle Health Board, as opposed to adversarial and tribal. That would be my hope.
And I very much agree with you on that. And how do you do that, and how do you amend that? And how do you...
Isn't that the question?
It is. You know, how do you manage conflict? I mean, it's all about how you manage conflict, and that's a challenge that all of us face. to me, conflict management is huge. And it's not that you disagree. I think disagreement is a good thing. I think disagreement makes us better. It makes us sharper. It makes us think at all the different pieces of it. But how you manage it? Are you respectful for each other? Do you listen to each other's opinions and not lose your cool, even if the other person does? And how do you maintain that relationship, irregardless of some of the things that are coming at you? I think are key. You know, they say if in conflict or disagreement, if we all agreed, one of us would be unnecessary. So, you know, disagreeing's good. It's how it's handled that is huge.
Yeah, I guess, you know, a couple things. I'd have to second what Leslie said, that is to say, with regard to nutrition. Foods that I now will eat that I didn't much care for as a child, because I was raised in, I guess you could say, a Greek-American home. So that was if you will, the Mediterranean diet, which I didn't much care for. Beef was not a big part of our diet. But now, being older and being able to appreciate, based on what I've read and experienced, I can see the benefit. The other thing, too, when you talk about conflict, what's fascinating is that when I was in graduate school, we basically dissected, and in fact, the class was on conflict resolution with international disputes. And the particular conflict was the Cuban Missile Crisis, which probably predates most of us here. It goes back to, was it 1962? Where we and the Soviets were on the brink of World War III because of missiles that the Soviets had placed in Cuba. JFK said, "Oh, no, you don't. You're not placing those 90 miles from our shores." Anyway, long story short, when you look at the way that was resolved, and I won't go into the detail, it was absolutely fascinating, because the range of options that he was entertaining, there were about 10 of them, was do nothing, or invade, attack the Soviet Union. And eventually, the strategy that was accepted, which was his brother's, Robert Kennedy's, managed to extricate us from that, and we did it in such a way that there was not a single shot was fired. But I think conflict resolution is key, and I think you're absolutely right. It's not a question of whether one is going to have or we're going to have conflict. The question is, how do you react to it? And it's, I don't know, how did we resolved it? That the resolution of conflict built this country, and it really came down to compromise. Somebody had to make concessions, and without concessions, there's no compromise, and without compromise, there's no solution, typically.
No, I agree. Compromise, negotiation are key ingredients to that.
Do you have any other questions for us?
Speaking of that, how does the board interact together, the health board, the functioning of the board itself?
Do you want to take that?
Well, they're drawn from 5 counties, and each of the county puts I think it was one person on.
Except for Bonner and Kootenai, we have 2.
Yeah,
Bonner
we have 2. And honestly, I don't think they do much other than the regular Panhandle Health meeting, which I usually attend recently this year by Zoom, and there's not a lot of discussion. There's a lot of stating my position is, and that's it. And it bothers me to see that, because there really isn't a lot of discussion.
I have to admit, like I said, I think part of it is asking the right questions and having those conversations.
You know, and this year, the mask mandate took center stage.
Yeah.
But typically, many of their conversations, I think, deal around finances.
Yeah, budget and stuff.
Budgets, things of that nature. It is a 7-member board, and as Leslie pointed out, Bonner and Kootenai appoint or offer 2, and the other 3 counties, 1 each. And when it comes to this position, what happens is we put forth a candidate, or 2, or 3, and the 15 county commissioners vote, and it's the simple majority. And that's what
before
determines.
COVID, I don't think very many people, other than direct recipients of their services, ever heard of Panhandle Health.
Yeah. I'm sure that has surfaced a lot of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of opinions. I have to say, I obviously, the virus and the whole situation that we've had over the last year has been huge, but that isn't really the impetus for my wanting to be on the board. I think that's an important aspect that we are going to still have to work with in the next couple years, but there are so many other issues, such as nutrition, such as children's health, such as our mental health, such as our lack of healthcare providers. I think that's something that we need to look at. And I don't think it's just physician healthcare providers, by the way. Being a nurse, I'm a little bit more aware of the nursing shortage and the problems there. And I think a lot of nurses leave the field that first year. And so I know that NIC has received some state money from the legislature just recently granted to them to invest into faculty, to have the opportunity to train more nurses and get more graduates and more nurses out there in the field. And I think LCSC also got some monies towards that. So there's lots of avenues where we need to look at it. And it isn't just the pandemic. There's a lot that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Any more questions for us?
I can't think of any.
Okay. Leslie, okay, Bill?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We'll be making a decision either later this week or next week, and everyone will be informed.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity
You
to
bet.
interview, and I do appreciate the work that you guys do on this board as well. So
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.
good to meet you.
You bet. Likewise. So public comment. Come right up.
Hi, I'm Sandy White for the record. I have a couple of different questions. Just one, is Panhandle Health a voluntary position? Do they get paid anything?
No,
for
they're
that?
unpaid.
Okay, I was just wondering that. And then we had talked earlier about you, Bill, being on the board.
Well, I'm
You're not-
liaison to Panhandle.
Okay, all righty. And then also, someone mentioned earlier, I can't remember who, was about the vaccinations and how someone who's unvaccinated puts people at risk. And I was just wondering, if someone's vaccinated, how does an unvaccinated person put them at risk?
I don't think anybody here on the
I heard,
commission said that.
yeah,
No, it was one of the
No, I think it
interviews.
Okay.
was, I think it was Dr. Edwards,
okay.
if I'm not mistaken.
All right, because I just thought that was interesting that people look at unvaccinated people as a risk when, if you're vaccinated, aren't you protected? I was just wondering about that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think he struggled with that a little bit. And even now, they're saying that even if we're vaccinated, there could be a recurrence. And the
Okay.
vaccines might, I don't know if they've actually determined the length of what they call efficacy, but I think it's like 6 months, maybe a year, and then a possible booster.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And I was also wondering about a job description for the people on the Panhandle Health, like your two representatives. Do you guys have like a list of things you expect from them? Like how often they communicate with you, or what they're looking for, or what your stance is? Are they representing you and what you think, or are they representing themselves and what they think?
Well,
Want to take
that's-
that,
Oh, you take it.
Leslie?
That's a good question. So I think that when we do make a nomination going forth, or I guess, let me put it this way. Once the entire District 1 has voted and somebody's been selected, then I think this board should talk about expectations on communication, on things like that. So that's what would be important to me, is mostly a communication issue. We are the highest contributor to their budget, Kootenai County is, so that's important to me, that they're kind of looking out for different aspects of their service to the citizens of Kootenai directly.
Okay, so this person who gets on the board, would they be representing what you guys want, or is it their own slant?
I think it has to be what we want, only because in theory, it is supposed to be one of us.
Okay,
And so one of us would be representing the board.
okay. So do you feel like Jay Nelson and Dr. McClandress represented you and your board adequately?
I'll plead the fifth.
Well, that really, honestly, questions like this are outside the scope of public comment.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, no, it's
But
a legitimate question.
It is a legitimate
Okay.
question.
And your suggestion in terms of job description, I think maybe points to a real problem we have, because generally, I don't interview people that I don't have a firm job description for. It's a very good point.
And, you know, I'll actually take a stab at it. I think what happened there is they exercised their best judgment. So when you take someone like Dr. McClandress, I'm not qualified to question his judgment. I mean, I can question it, but I don't have his credentials. For that matter, I don't have Jay Nelson's credentials. So I think what happened there, Sandy, is they made the decision based on their professional experience and judgment. That's all changed now. Did they pass it? They did, didn't they?
They did.
So what happens now is that any potential mandate, if there is to be one, has to come from us.
Okay.
They make the recommendation. We actually issue the, what do you want to call it, directive?
Stamp of approval?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They no longer have the legal authority to issue a mandate.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think you have a hard job ahead of you. I heard some
Thank
really
you.
good
Yeah,
people today.
thank you.
So, yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Sandy.
you.
For coming to
Appreciate
these
it.
too.
Aaron, did you want to? Okay. It was, absolutely. Okay, then. Nancy, are we okay? 11 o'clock, meeting adjourned. Thank you.